Today, we're going to compare XTB versus Interactive Brokers, but we won't do it like I've seen in a lot of content where they just say this is like this and that is like that, and it's just a reading and nobody knows how to actually verify it. Well, in my case, what we're going to do directly is go section by section, reviewing all the important data, which will allow us in the end to make a decision on which one is better, which one works best for each of us, and more. So let's get started. First, we're here on Wikipedia. I know this might not be that useful for comparing, but surely for many, the following data will be useful, and above all is the date on which each one was founded. XTB was born first of all in Poland and was founded in 2002, that is 24 years ago. While if we come over here, Interactive Brokers was founded in 1978, that is 48 years ago in New York, that is from the United States. And right from the start, we already find a differentiation between both, and it's that one comes directly from Poland and the other comes directly from the United States. Now, this is important, but let's say we're already starting with this first point, and it's the history of both brokers, of both investment platforms. But we also have to start with the topic of regulations, as we see here. Regulations, for those who don't know, are basically the rules that are going to establish for us in what way we can use the platform. But there is one very important thing, and it's that depending on where you are watching this video, different regulations will apply. For example, the first one around here that appears to us is that it's directly regulated in Poland, this one that appears over here. Then also this one here is regulated in the United Kingdom, and also this one here is regulated in Spain. While in the case of Interactive Brokers, it has regulation in the United States, it also has regulation in the United Kingdom, which is the one that appears over here. But this is important. Yes, but remember that this will impact depending on the country you are from, because it's not the same being a person from the United Kingdom and having the United Kingdom regulation as having the United States regulation. It's going to change a lot. So what's the first thing you should keep in mind? Obviously, one always prefers a strict regulation, a regulation that, well, we can trust, because in the end, we're going to deposit our money here, but it also limits us in certain things. For example, for those who are going to do trading and need, for example, leverage, a more relaxed regulation, to put it some way, is going to be easier to have a much higher leverage. So they are things we must keep in mind, but in this case, evidently regarding regulations. Let's say they're on an equal level, except that in Interactive Brokers, we have the United States. However, one thing must also be kept in mind. Both are publicly traded, both XTB and Interactive Brokers. The difference is that Interactive Brokers is listed on the stock exchange, on the NASDAQ, as you see here, while XTB is listed on the Polish stock exchange, which is over here. Both are listed, and some will say, well, and why is this useful to me? Well, because basically a company that is listed is obliged to publicly give its financial statements, see how its financial health is going, and that way we can study both platforms how they're doing. That's the business model if we invest in the broker itself, meaning the stock, rather than through it. If I want to invest in Interactive Brokers or XTB, this information obviously interests me. It's just that this information also interests us, because that way we'll see the financial health of the platform where we're depositing money to invest in other opportunities and stocks and ETFs and trading, etc., etc. Now, let's move on to the second thing. And the second thing is the financial products, in this case at XTB. Here we have it, very easy to understand. We have these that appear over here that I'm going to show you in more detail. We have stocks, we have ETFs, we have CFDs on Forex, we have CFDs on indices, we have CFDs on commodities, and we have investment plans. So these investment plans are actually the same as ETFs. It's just that you choose, for example, 5 ETFs, and you choose to have $100 automatically invested every month. So it's basically that. It's not an investment itself, but a way of investing. Generally, we have this here. For someone investing in stocks or ETFs, this is plenty. If they want CFDs on indices, Forex, or commodities, they'll want that. For Interactive Brokers, we have this and stocks too. We also have ETFs, but here we find the first difference, and that's options. At XTB, for now, we don't have options, nor do we have futures. That's another thing to keep in mind. We have the option to invest directly in currencies, in actual currencies. They can be real currencies. I mean, we're not trading, but literally buying foreign exchange, so to speak, but we're going to have them within the platform. We also have the option to invest in CFDs, which is what XTB also allowed us to do, but we also have metals, bonds, and mutual funds. So, well, obviously, if we compare these two in this sense, in terms of investment options, Interactive Brokers would clearly win on this point because it has more options. But again, remember, if you're someone, for example, who's only going to invest in stocks directly, without trading, without using options, without using futures, well, either one might work for you. But if you're someone who is going to use options or futures, well, obviously you won't be able to do that on XTB. So you'd have to use interactive brokers in this comparison, which, by the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning that my idea is to make videos like this comparing all the brokers that exist. So tell me which other one you want us to compare in the future. This is like the second point, right? Let's go to the next one now. The next point is commissions, because obviously, well, it could be that we can invest in the same thing. Let's say we want to invest in stocks on both platforms, but what's going to change everything completely will be the fact of investing in an asset and being charged a certain percentage in commission. Here, in the case of XTB, it tells us that opening the account and maintenance is completely free, that deposits are free, that there's no minimum deposit, that withdrawals are over $50, and here that we'll be able to invest in ETFs and stocks and that it'll be free. Now, here's where we have a point, and that is that it'll be free as long as we don't exceed 100,000 euros or dollars, depending on the currency in which you make your trades. So in this case, it tells us that if we're going to invest normally in stocks and ETFs, the commission will be zero, meaning they won't charge us anything if we invest less than this amount, $100,000 or euros. If you invest more than this amount, then this fee over here will start to apply, which is 0.2%. Now, another important thing is that this is for real stocks, actual stocks, underlying assets, and actual real ETFs. But if we do it through CFDs, obviously the issue in the fees for direct trading, leverage, and all that kind of stuff, well, obviously it's going to have a specific commission. But for now, to keep it simple, let's just stick with this one for stocks and ETFs. Now, let's go straight to interactive brokers and take a look at the commissions here. And here we also find a total mess, a huge mess when it comes to commissions. We'll see that over here, for example, we have all these options. That's why I was telling you that we're only going to consider stocks and ETFs for this comparison. But obviously, if you're going to invest in options, for example, we can't compare them since there are no options on XTB. But anyway, let's use this one for stocks and ETFs as a guide. And here's the thing. Interactive Brokers has a model that's a bit hard for many to understand because it's based on volume and has two categories, fixed and tiered. So with the fixed one, for any amount of stocks or ETFs you buy, it's always going to charge you 0.005. But for example, this is a higher amount than some of the amounts shown over here. So sometimes for a certain number of shares, it's better to invest through the tiered model than the fixed one. I don't want to overcomplicate this because I'd have to spend a whole video on it. But honestly, from the start, XTB would win on commissions, especially for stocks, because if you have less than 100,000 euros, it wouldn't charge you anything. If you exceed this amount, then we'd have to start debating and calculating specifically. But anyway, regarding this, I'll leave a video in the description where I explain the whole commission thing in detail so you could understand it, even using a calculator. I made that video several years ago actually, but it's still relevant because this still works the same way. It's just that some people find it a bit complicated. This isn't just for the United States. For example, when investing in US stocks and ETFs, this table applies. But both also let you invest in various markets. On interactive brokers, you can also invest in Canada. And if you're going to invest in Canada, the commissions change and are different. And if you're going to invest in Mexico, for example, the commissions are also different. In Brazil, they're also different. And that's what we'd have to look into to see if it's worth investing in any of these stocks shown here and check all the commissions that would apply. But as I said, in terms of simplicity and being straightforward, let's say XTB would win because of the commission, which below 100,000 euros would be non-existent. Above 100,000 euros, we'd have to see if this commission is more expensive than what they charge us here at Interactive Brokers, which, by the way, aren't just here in the Americas, but also over here in Austria, Estonia, Belgium, and, well, several other countries where you can invest. Now we move on to the next point of comparison, which is deposits. So here we have XTB. I'm going to click on deposit and then click on add money. And this, again, will change depending on the regulations we have. In my case, it allows me to deposit with a credit card, debit card, Skrill, NetTeller, or local payment methods, depending on the country you're watching this video from. You can log in and certain local methods will appear, so that's pretty good. I usually use the card option. It's actually very easy. Sometimes it has certain limits since you have to verify the account every time you're going to deposit a high amount. So, well, in this case, for example, it lets me deposit $1,788, and then I'll have to send a, let's say, security validation to keep depositing with this method. Now, as we can see, we have quite a few deposit methods. Card, we have Skrill, Neteller, we have local deposit methods, which, well, for my country is this one, but for your country, it might be different. Everyone would have to log in there. And we also always have the option of a bank transfer, the classic one. And this is into a dollar account, which is this one right here, which accepts dollars and is simply an international transfer from the bank we have in our countries. Then, once this is understood, we move on to the options Interactive Brokers allows us here in Transfer and Pay. Then deposit funds, we click Select, and here we have the options. But remember again that here we'll be able to have different currencies, and in these different currencies, each one will have its respective deposit method. In this case, the vast majority of people usually deposit in dollars, so let's leave it in dollars. And here, bank transfer appears, which is the same thing Interactive Brokers offers us. But now, if, for example, you're in the United States or have a US bank account, you can do a direct ACH transfer, which is free. They don't charge us, so that's pretty good. Since when transferring, well, obviously there are also commissions, just as we shouldn't only consider commissions for buying and selling stocks or ETFs, but we must also consider commissions at the time of deposit. So this one is free. Here it is. Again, if we officially have an account in a US bank, we can link it and deposit. And we can also deposit with Wise. So when depositing with Wise, well, we'd have to have an account on this platform. For those who don't know it, well, Wise is like a currency platform that allows us to deposit and transfer money to different places. And we also have the crypto option here, which isn't that old. This is actually recent. It only charges us a 0.3% commission here, and it will always charge a minimum of $1. This will obviously depend on the stablecoin we choose and the network through which we decide to send the money. The rest I don't really consider because it's tedious, like the check issue. They use checks for tradition or in large companies that still operate that way. I'm not sure who else uses them these days, but it depends on the person. So in this sense, both are very evenly matched. I like XTB because depositing with a card doesn't charge me anything. If I deposit $200 from my account, it takes exactly $200. It works for both Visa and MasterCard, so that's great. In that sense, I like it a lot. Here on Interactive Brokers, I usually use the ACH one. This is mostly about what your bank charges you to transfer here. If your bank charges a lot, then obviously, even if it says free on Interactive Brokers end, if the bank charges us, it won't be as reliable. And as for stablecoins, like I said, it depends on what you want to deposit and through which network, because this would be a huge advantage over what's offered here. But really, using a card is a great way to deposit, but it's also available here. So they're very evenly matched on this point, to be honest. Now, let's move on to the next point of comparison. Just as depositing is important, at some point we'll need to withdraw our money. So we have to look at the withdrawal methods and how good they are. Let's click withdraw here and see that when withdrawing, I'll add a new method so we can take a look. Basically, the withdrawal methods are the same as the deposit methods. For example, on Interactive Brokers, the only difference is that we won't be able to withdraw in crypto. We can deposit crypto, but we can't withdraw it yet. Soon you can, like withdrawing to Wise. Just as we can deposit, we can also withdraw, but obviously there are fees. And let's say the most traditional and easiest way would be a bank transfer. We also set it up and send it. The good thing is that there's one monthly withdrawal that's completely free. After that, they charge us $10 and we can withdraw to any bank account in the world that accepts dollars. It doesn't necessarily have to be a US account, so that's a huge advantage. Now let's go to XTB. On the XTB side, we can withdraw to the same card we used to deposit, or we can withdraw to Skrill or Neteller, so that's also quite interesting. But I'm not entirely convinced, because while withdrawing to Skrill and Neteller is very easy and simple, which I like, when it comes to actually taking the money out of Skrill or Neteller, I feel those platforms have fees that are way too high. So what we're left with are transfers to our local bank. In my case, this account is registered in Colombia. Obviously, since it's registered in Colombia, I have to add an account that's in Colombia. So I have to use an account that's local to my country of registration. If you're in the US, Chile, Spain, Italy, well, wherever you register, you'll obviously have to provide a local bank account. But this varies depending on the country you're in. In my case, regarding this point, I feel that depending on your needs, one or the other might come out on top. For example, withdrawing locally here makes it much easier for me to receive money in my local account if that's where I want it. But for example, when withdrawing from Interactive Brokers, if I want to receive money in my local account in Colombia, it's an international transfer that I have to report, pay certain fees on, and they charge me certain commissions. So obviously, in that sense, it depends on the situation. Some will prefer interactive brokers because, for example, if you have an account that doesn't charge anything for receiving money from abroad, that's great. But if you receive money locally and they charge you fees, you might not like XTB's option. So we'd have to see and analyze, but in this case, I'd call it a tie on this point, since it really depends on what you need and require regarding withdrawals. Though interactive brokers wins by a bit more, since you can withdraw in different currencies. If I deposit or invest in euros, I can withdraw euros to my European bank account, so it arrives in the exact same currency I invested in. So that's actually pretty good. And finally, we have the investment platforms. Now, I'm going to categorize this for beginners and advanced users. For beginners, let's say they're at a very similar level, because XTB has its own platform, both on mobile phones and on the web platform, and both work for buying and selling stocks and also for trading. Let's say the web platform's a bit more advanced, and even the app can sometimes be a bit complex for beginner users to understand. Let's just say we find everything in these two apps in a simple and easy way. However, on interactive brokers, we find many other options. We have the app itself, which is this one right here. We have the desktop version, which is the one we're currently using, but we also have other ways, including through the interactive brokers APIs to be able to connect to them. So we have many more options, even some a bit more advanced, to be able to invest. Obviously, this is very beneficial for advanced people, again, but if you're a beginner, for example, it says so here. Well, for beginners, let's say both platforms are pretty much on par. They're easy to understand. However, for advanced users, well, Interactive Brokers offers many more options, as we see here, which are these ones over here, including APIs, which, for those who know, obviously this gives access to many very advanced options for instrumentation, even artificial intelligences, to be able to use them on this platform. But anyway, that's another topic we can cover in another video. That being said, this is the final comparison. To wrap up, this really depends on what you need as an investor, as a trader. For advanced needs, Interactive Brokers wins. For intermediate users, XTB is better. Also, if investing under 100,000 euros, XTB wins on commissions. Now, regarding commissions, Interactive Brokers is a bit tedious because of the process, so check the link in the description to help you understand how they work. See you next time. Thanks for watching this video.